Today's episode is kindly sponsored by Classic Pop magazine. For fans of Electric Friends, Classic Pop is a must-read. It's the UK's only magazine dedicated to 80s music, as well as dipping into the 70s and 90s. From in-depth reviews and expert features to world-exclusive interviews with incredible artists, it's written by pop fans for pop fans. And stick around because later in the episode, we've got a special offer from Classic Pop just for you.
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.
In 1987, Gary Numan had a top 40 hit. It got playlisted on Radio 1, Smash Hits printed the lyrics, and for a brief moment he was back in the pop mainstream. There was just one catch: it wasn't actually a Gary Numan record. This is the story of Radio Heart, three Scottish brothers, one reluctant frontman, a cameo from Elton John, and a project Gary would later call a mistake, but one that produced some of the most fascinating curios in his entire catalogue. Hello and welcome to Electric Friends, Gary Numan podcast. I'm Tom, and this month we're heading back to 1987 and to one of the odder detours in Gary's career, Radio Heart.
I lose myself in the night, walking the streets in the rain. I turn away from the lights to find the shadows again. I see the face in the window. I feel the touch of her hand. I hear her voice say, I need you. I guess I can understand. Radio Heart, playing sad song for me. One from the heart, so she'll come back to me. Radio Heart, send all my love for me.
The timing couldn't be better because on the 7th of August, Edsel Records release all across the nation a collection, a newly mastered deluxe 2 CD set gathering everything Gary recorded with Radio Heart between 1987 and 1994, plus the original album, the remixes, his self-written B-sides, and 2 previously unreleased tracks. It's the first time any of this material has been on CD since 1999. And to help tell the story, I caught up with the man who compiled the set and wrote its sleeve notes, Steve Thorpe. Steve's been putting reissues together since the mid-noughties, including the Sharp and Numan automatic reissue, and as you'll hear, he's a proper Numanoid. So before we get into the history, I asked Steve about his own history with Gary's music.
So I'm very much child of the 70s, born in 72 and got into music around late 70s watching Top of the Pops. Definitely remember our friend's Electric performance and being completely blown away. I mean, I was 7 years old, I think, when that happened. And so it was like, my God, this is so different to Blondie or the Boomtown Rats, you know. And I bought the singles, sort of, you know, probably every time a single came out, I bought those through to about 82 with Numan. And then I bought the Numan compilation, which I really treasured. I absolutely loved that album, played it to death. And then for some reason, I kind of just dropped off a little bit during the kind of the Dance and Warriors Berserker period. I was always aware he was there and what he was doing, and I saw the Top of the Pops Berserker performance. But then it was hearing Your Fascination, and I bought the Fury, and I was like, okay, I've missed out on quite a lot here. I really like what he's doing. So yeah, no, I followed him for a long time and was a member of the fan club as well from 1986.
And Steve's route into the reissue world is a story in itself, starting as a labour of love with Cherry Red and ending up as the person deciding what goes on the disc, what goes in the booklet, and what the whole thing sounds like.
Yeah, this is very much my secondary job as a consultant. So I worked, originally I started working with Cherry Red Records back in about 2005, and I was working with them on their glam label. So we were doing quite a lot of different reissues for the 70s imprint. And then I started working on Cherry Pop releases. So we did some great ones there. We did, with Cherry Pop, we did the first 5 Kim Wilde albums. And we worked on Sharp and Newman on Automatic, which was a really fun release to do, one that I was really keen to get out there. We also did, what else? Animotion, so from the mid-80s, and a lot of other artists. And my role really was to work alongside the full-time guys at the label and to bring more of a music fan's perspective. So often I was able to actually say, this is something I think you should release, put a sequence together, a track listing, make sure all the versions of different tracks were on there. And then they would license it. They would have a look and see if they could license it from the labels. And then once that was cleared, which could sometimes take 6 months, or it could take a year, or in the case of Sharp and Newman Automatic, tracks might be left off. We couldn't put a Change Your Mind 12-inch on there, which was really frustrating. Or New Thing from London Town. You would then basically work with the record company in a project management role to make sure that all of the versions of the tracks were the correct ones that you were getting from the label, make sure that the artwork was coming together. Writing the liner notes was usually one of my main things to do, and that could go through obviously loads of different iterations from start to finish. And then signing off on the audio. So once the mastering had been done, signing off on that audio from the mastering studios, and then signing off on the artwork as well, and looking at proofing, looking at anything that needed to go in there. And also quite often we would do a lot of the work on what went into the artwork. So memorabilia, one label might say, well, we don't really like using memorabilia. We like to use sleeve scans, 7-12 and albums. And another label might say, actually, we really like some lyrics from, a newsletter or smash hits or that kind of thing. So it's great fun. It's something I did for ages as a labour of love without getting paid, just enjoy doing it and having a final product. But I've sort of moved into it more professionally now.
So to understand why Gary Numan ended up fronting somebody else's pop band, you have to understand where he was at the end of 1986. Numan Records, the label Gary had founded in 1984, was in trouble. Berserker and The Fury were albums he'd poured himself into, but commercially, things were sliding. I Can't Stop had charted in 86, but the parent album, Strange Charm, stalled at number 59 and vanished. Gary has said it was a difficult record to make, a slog with songs stretched out to fill the running time, and by the end of the year, both the label and its founder needed a lift.
Gonna capture your heart right from the start. You belong to me. Gonna take my soul to town. Gonna set my spirit free. Gonna capture your heart right from the start. You belong to me.
Enter the Nicholsons. Hugh and David Nicholson were Scottish brothers who'd been in bands throughout the 70s, including one called Blue, not the boy band, with Hugh writing songs and singing lead. Crucially, there was a third brother, Matt Nicholson, who worked as part of Gary's management team at Rock City in Shepperton alongside Tony Webb. Matt could see Gary's profile needed a push, and as it happened, his brother had just written a song.
I was listening at the time, in 1987, I was just in the fan club and had absolutely loved Strange Charm. I think I'm one of the few people that think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, particularly my breathing and the title track as well. And I had bought that on CD, and I was in the fan club getting the newsletters. And I remember thinking, well, I wonder what's coming in 87. And then out of the blue, I was on holiday and there was this single, Radio Heart, that was on the radio. So obviously at the time I bought it. So I've since found out over the years, it was basically David and Hugh Nicholson who were writing the songs and had been in various other bands in the 70s and early 80s. I think they're Scottish, actually. I think they're Scottish brothers. And I think there was a band called Blue that they were actually in, and Hugh was the guitarist and lead singer. And Matt, their other brother, so the third brother, he was a member of the management team with Tony Webb and Gary Numan at Shepperton, at Rock City. And he was part of the Numan Records management as well. And as I said in the liner notes for the new reissue, things weren't going obviously particularly well financially or artistically for Numa by the end of '86. And so Matt basically suggested to Gary, look, your profile needs a bit of a push here. I Can't Stop and This Is Love had been in the charts in '86, but the album had done nothing, number 59, and sort of disappeared without trace. So I think he was thinking, how can we just get things moving? And he said, my brother's written this song, Radio Heart, and do you want to have a listen and see what you think? Aid Orange was also involved in it as well, and of course had recorded Strange Charm with Gary. And so I think he played some keyboards on it too. So yeah, it was just this, what looked like a one-off. It looked like a one-off single, which hit Radio 1 and did really well, and everybody heard it and thought, that's a great new single. I can remember Smash Hits carried the lyrics for it. There were different versions, with picture discs and different coloured sleeves. And I just really loved it. And then sort of out of nowhere, London Times appeared as well as the second single, and wasn't quite so keen on that one immediately, but that appeared out of nowhere. And it was nice just to sort of pick up comments from the fan club newsletters and just kind of see where he was going with it. Yeah. But appeared to just really be, a couple of singles basically.
So Radio Heart came out in March 1987, a bright anthemic pop single about as far from the fury as you could get, and it worked. Radio 1 playlisted it, and it climbed to number 35 in the UK singles chart, Gary's best showing in a while, even if his name was in the featuring slot.
This is Bruno Brooks with the UK Top 40, the hottest stereo countdown of best-selling singles in Great Britain. Compiled for the BBC by Gallup and used exclusively by Radio 1, Top of the Pops and the British record industry. At 40, When a Man Loves a Woman, Percy Sledge. Crush on You, The Jets at 39. And at 38, What You Get Is What You See, Tina Turner. At number 37, Benny King, Stand By Me. Here's the first of 4 new entries on the chart this week for Gary Numan.
Number 36.
Singles followed that year, London Times in June and All Across the Nation in November, both charting.
All across the nation, fame takes control. Money is temptation, money saves your soul. One thing I can tell you, of this there is no doubt. A rich man needs his comfort and a poor man doesn't allow. Everybody loves somebody all around the world, but everybody knows if the rich man gets to go. London Times, yeah, they were the golden times. Captured all the hearts and minds. Oh, how the memory shines, like diamonds, keep shining like diamonds.
And I'll admit to a personal soft spot here, London Times was one of the first Numan adjacent songs I ever heard, weirdly, so it's always had a strange little place in my heart. And as Steve told me, that one got a very nice upgrade for the new set.
That's one of the songs we found the master tapes for when we were putting this together. So we have, for the first time, we have the absolute perfect version of the 7-inch of the album track. It sounds fantastic.
Was Gary actually keen on any of this? A man who'd built his career on Alienation and Machines, suddenly singing upbeat radio pop. I asked Steve how much convincing it took.
I think he was in quite a personal low. You know, I think he's on record as saying that Strange Charm was a really difficult album to make. I think he'd really been invested in Berserker and The Fury, and, you know, quite rightly, they're brilliant albums. But I think with Strange Charm, he just felt Aid can get on with quite a lot of this, and the Wave team can get on with it, and all the songs are like extended by an extra 2 or 3 minutes to try and fill it up. And I think he was a bit, you know, finding it all a bit of a slog, and knowing as well that it wasn't really going to get listened to by many people or played on the radio. So I think he probably jumped at it. I don't remember any negative vibes about it in the kind of first half of 1987. I remember him writing about it in the newsletter, in the fan club newsletter, which we've reproduced that page in the booklet for the CD, where he used to write a little kind of introduction to each newsletter and sign it off. And he said, you know, Radio 1 have been brilliant with the Radio Heart single, and looking, there'll be another one at some point soon. So I think he was really quite willing to go with it. And it was only kind of as he headed towards Metal Rhythm, and, you know, which is obviously although it's a very commercial album and a very pop album, it's also pretty angry, and you know, it's got some sort of real vitriol on it. I think he just felt, yeah, this is not really me at all. And then the real nail in the coffin was when the album was released at the end of 1987, the Radio Heart album, and they withdrew it once Gary and his team said, I'm not singing on every track, and you're making it look like it's a whole album here. So yeah, that was the nail in the coffin, I think.
So that was the view from the fan club newsletters. Gary in public, upbeat, telling fans how brilliant it was to be back on Radio 1. But as usual on this show, it's worth letting Gary tell his own side, because in his autobiography, Revolution, he paints a much darker picture of exactly the same moment.
Numan Records was clearly not going to work out. If we were going to have any chance of doing better, with so many things against us, it was becoming increasingly clear that I would need the muscle and the money of a major label, or at least a better funded label than Numan. While we were starting to look around to see what interest there might be, I had an offer from a new label called GFM to sing a guest vocal on a song called Radio Heart with a band of the same name. It was a good offer, and the money felt like a lifeline to a drowning man. Unfortunately, it wasn't really my thing at all, lightweight pop music, and it was my dad who eventually persuaded me to say yes. He knew how vital that money was to us, and it bought us valuable time. The song picked up a healthy amount of radio play, becoming a top 40 single when it was released in the spring of '87. I didn't, however, feel it did anything for my situation. It wasn't my song, and it wasn't a style of music I would ever want to write myself. I was just a paid singer. If anything, it just showed that to get on the radio, I would effectively have to stop being me. I recorded 2 more singles with Radio Heart, London Times and All Across the Nation, that year. Neither of them did as well as the first.
Let's take a quick pause to talk about my friends at Classic Pop Magazine. If you're a fan of synth pop, new wave, or anything 80s music, which, let's face it, you must be if you're here, then this magazine is essential reading. Whether you want in-depth explorations of classic albums, exclusive interviews with your favourite artists, or all the latest music news, it's all in there. I'm already a subscriber, and there have been various Numan specials over the years. Classic Pop have kindly given me an exclusive subscription offer to share with you. Try the magazine today and you can get your first issue completely free. There's no commitment, no risk, just your first issue delivered straight to you. Head over to classicpopmag.com/electricfriends to claim your free issue today. That's classicpopmag.com/electricfriends, and the link is in the description. So go and check it out. And now back to the episode. Here's the thing about the Radio Heart era, and it's why I think it deserves more than a footnote: the B-sides. Because while the A-sides were Hugh Nicholson's pop songs, the flips were pure Numan, written by Gary himself. There's Mr. Sax. There's Rumour.
I listen to rumors, stone cold and breathing. They burn my heart, left me alone and afraid.
And then there's River, the B-side of All Across the Nation, an atmospheric instrumental built on the Roland D50, a synth that would soon be all over Metal Rhythm. Listen to River now and you can hear it plain as day. This is Gary Numan working out that he wants to write for film. The soundtrack career starts here, hiding on the back of a pop single. And then there's the album itself. Radio Heart got a limited release in late 1987 with Gary on the 3 singles and Hugh Nicholson singing the rest. Plus one genuinely surreal credit, because playing keyboards on 2 tracks, Strange Thing and The Victim, is Elton John.
Yeah, I think that was through the Nicholsons and their connection, because Elton's playing on 2 of the album tracks. I think it's The Victim and Strange Thing. Yeah, it was quite a surprise to see his name on there. I mean, I can imagine Ray Cooper being on there, coming in and playing some percussion. But I think it's on Strange Thing, there's a piano run that I was listening to the other day, and there's a run that's very Elton that's kind of in one of the breaks. And I think he's just kind of there and just vamping away on the piano, but he's certainly not featured on it. You blink and you miss the fact that he's actually involved on it at all. It's Hugh and David. Hugh's mainly the guy doing the guitars, doing the vocals on their own tracks. Ada Orange did some keyboards. You got the great Tessa Niles doing backing vocals, who obviously was working with Gary on a lot of the 80s releases. We only found out about 3 months ago that it definitely was her on there. We asked Matt about it, and he said, yeah, I can confirm it's definitely Tessa, because she's not credited on the original recordings. And then the whole thing was recorded at Tapestry Studios, and they mixed it all up in Camden at Roundhouse Studio. And those are the tapes that we were able to find, which was great.
She could be what you wanna be as wild as a raging sea. No one to love, no one to care about her.
But the album barely got out the door. Gary had refused to record a full album with Radio Heart, and once he and his team saw the record being presented as though he sang on the whole thing, it was withdrawn. And that refusal came at a real cost, because remember, it was his dad who'd persuaded him into this in the first place, and by now saying no meant saying no to money the family desperately needed.
I didn't really want to be involved at all, and I was very unhappy. I said no to doing an album with them, and I began to argue a lot with my dad. He was taking all the pressure of trying to keep us going financially, and he was having a nightmare time. We were building up huge debts, and here was I saying no to something that could really help. I was made to feel as though I was letting the family down by not being willing to swallow my pride and just do the album. It wasn't pride though. I felt strongly, very strongly, that if I was ever going to find a way back, I would destroy what small amount of credibility I had left by continuing with something like Radio Heart. I felt that it was likely to lose what few fans I had left. More than that though, I just didn't enjoy it. The whole point of being in music was to make music you loved, music you felt passionate about. Radio Heart was the absolute opposite of that. I might have been a little lost as far as my own direction and creativity were concerned at that time, but I still knew I wasn't ready to sell my soul completely.
In hindsight, it was probably the right call. Gary walked away, headed into Metal Rhythm, and later filed the whole episode under mistakes. The story of Radio Heart looked finished. But it wasn't. Fast forward to October 1993. Gary is out on the Dream Corrosion tour, back in control of his own sound and heading towards Sacrifice. And at one of the shows, Hugh Nicholson reappears with a new song. It was called Over on the Other Side at the time, and it was about the plight of young African refugees seeking safety in Europe. Gary listened to it before his show at Birmingham Town Hall on the 27th of October, and the very next day laid down his vocals over the freshly finished backing track. That track featured Italian percussionist Dada Dang with thunder drums and Ulean pipes, giving it an ethnic, folky flavour completely unlike anything else in his catalogue. Released in May 1994 as Like a Refugee, I Won't Cry, billed as Numan and Dada Dang, it crept to number 78 and disappeared, but Steve makes a big claim for it.
So Like a Refugee, I think, Gary basically got to the point where he said, I won't be recording anymore with Radio Heart or the record label, and he, very much distanced himself from the project. I think even now he probably, when he writes about it in his biography, he normally says, it was a mistake and I don't know why I did it, and looks back on it without any fond memories. But he was persuaded to come back, and so I think what happened was Hugh had written Like a Refugee in 1993, and it was called Over on the Other Side originally. It's pretty much exactly the same song, and he played it to Gary at one of the gigs on the Dream Corrosion tour, and Gary liked it, and I think was feeling comfortable enough with, I'm heading towards doing the Sacrifice album, my own sound again. And he was like, yeah, this is highlighting an issue with the refugees and crossing from Africa, and I really like the song. So I don't think it took him too much persuasion, and he went over to West Side Studios in London and recorded it in a day, and there it was. And actually, a friend of mine, a guy called Dominic Jones, he's a guy who I meet up with quite regularly on Numan gigs, and he knows the Dash team very well, who do the DVDs and the video Numan. He was involved with the original Like a Refugee release, and I think they had big hopes for it because it got some good reviews in the trade papers, but I don't remember hearing it on the radio, probably not even once actually at that time, which was 1994. But to my mind, it's one of the best pop records that Gary Numan's ever made. I know it's kind of got more of a kind of Celtic Phil Collins, really. It's like quite a strange.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, it's a very strange mixture, but it's a brilliant song. So so it's a shame it didn't do more than something like number 78, I think.
Like a refugee, never seems to be in place for me. In my mind there is a scene. My house is burning. don't have a friendship for the likes of me. I feel the thunder, I'm going under, and I can't get free. If there is a heaven, I don't wanna hang around this heaven. If there is a heaven, I can be an angel till I'm found. That brought me out of heaven back to hell. I say.
And the video shoot was every bit as strange as the record. Gary flew out to Italy to film with Dada Dang, and his memory of it, Revolution, is one of the most gloriously surreal passages in the book.
Soon after the OMD tour, I flew to Bergamo in Italy to shoot a video for my final involvement with the Radio Heart team. The song was called Like a Refugee, and we were to shoot a promo video for it with a remarkable marching band called Dada Dang. They dressed like robots and marched through the streets of Italy in costumes that glowed in the dark. It really was quite spectacular. The song didn't get anywhere, and Radio 1, as usual, didn't play it, although they did make me God of the Day, which was about as bizarre as singing with Dada Dang.
So, together with Sharp and Numan, this whole period stands as a rare glimpse of Gary genuinely engaging with the commercial mainstream, a road not taken, preserved in a handful of singles. Which brings us to the new collection, because getting this material back into the world has been a long campaign, and one Steve has been fighting since the last CDs appeared on Hugh's own label back in 1999, sounding, in Steve's words, not as good as he wanted them to.
Yeah, I probably, like a lot of fans, bought the original CDs in the end of the 90s. I think it was 99, 2000, and they were released on Hugh's own record label. But I was always really disappointed that they didn't sound as good as I wanted them to. There were a few vinyl rips in there, and it was a really nice package. It was nice to put the album out as the original 9 songs and then do the Nicholson-Newman compilation as well. But it just never sounded as good as I wanted it to. So I approached Demon and had a word with them about releasing the album. And they were great about it. They said, actually, yeah, Matt's catalogue is part of our recordings that we manage. And I put together the track list. And the idea was originally to do hopefully a vinyl and CD in 2018. But at that point, they were moving more towards vinyl as their preferred release for something that was more niche like this, where it wasn't going to sell tens of thousands. They wanted to look at the vinyl and the collector's side of it. So I worked it out to be the original album and adding Like a Refugee at the end of side B, and then with the second vinyl disc being the remixes and then Gary's B-sides as well. So we got that release in 2018, which is sitting here behind me. That was I think we only did 1,000 actually. We did them numbered, limited edition. This one's quite unusual because there's no numbers on it at all. It's like pre-stamping, which is nice.
Very rare.
Yeah, I'll show you on here. There you go. You can just see blank on that section. So it was really nice to get that done and to have it with the red vinyl, and it sold really well. But of course, the usual comments came back from various forums and different places saying, if it had been on CD, I would have definitely bought it.
The breakthrough came when Steve went back to Matt Nicholson directly and asked for the best possible sources. Matt went digging through storage and found the original production master tapes from Roundhouse Studios in Camden, where the album had been mixed. He personally dropped them off at Air Studios in Hampstead, where mastering engineer Phil Kinrad baked the tapes, a familiar hazard of 80s reel, as Berserker and the Fury fans will know, and transferred everything. And when Steve listened through the files, there were 2 tracks nobody had ever heard.
So we did, and we identified everything fairly quickly. And then we came across a couple of tracks that had never been heard before, which was great.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so one of them is the title track. It's Radio Heart with Gary's vocals, but it's a 1994 version of the song. So I talked to Dominic about that to find out whether, what was that connected to Like a Refugee? And no one can quite remember. It's too far back. But we think it was probably mooted to be an extra track on the Like a Refugee, either the CD singles or vinyl. So we've got I'd say it's a 90% finished version of that track. It's a great curio. It's got a slightly different arrangement, much tougher drums. The drums sound amazing on it. But there's some of the synths are missing, some of the more kind of anthemic sort of synths are missing, and it sounds like there's a middle section where they were going to do something with it, like a guitar solo or whatever, but it's not in there. But it's 90% there. It sounds great.
Sound in the night could be the turn of the key, and when I switch on the light, it's you I'm hoping to see.
And then the other track is Radio Heart with Hugh Nicholson singing it, but it's pretty much the backing track that Gary sang over in 1987, but just with Hugh's vocals. And that's really, really nice. He sings a few different sort of melodies on it in different places, and it's a great curio.
Radio Heart, play a sad song for me, one from the heart, so she'll come back to me.
The set has been sequenced with real care too. All 14 Gary tracks on disc 1 and the album tracks, demos and instrumentals on disc 2, reordered to actually flow. The booklet includes the fan club newsletter with Gary's letter, lyrics from smash hits, photos of the master tapes, and previously unseen black and white promo shots of Gary with Dada Dang filming the video in Italy.
But I really wanted to change the order of them. I wanted to make it a great listening experience. So I've put The Victim first, which was the last track on the album, which I think is the strongest of the Radio Heart songs. And then it goes through songs that are a similar style, like Mad About the Girl, and ends up with the one which is least like the singles, which is Starlight Jingles, which is more like a sort of country track. And then, of course, then you go into sort of the demos and the other tracks at the end. So it's, I played it a lot when I was walking the dog and just kind of having a listen to see whether it worked. And I think it's a nice mixture, nice variety.
So before we wrap up, I couldn't let Steve go without hearing his own encounters with the man himself, because over the years, Steve has met Gary 3 times, thanks largely to his friendship with drummer Richard Beasley. And the third of those meetings in 1996 is probably one of the best meeting Gary stories I've ever heard. Steve had been asked to drop round some drumsticks at Gary's house before the Premier Hits tour, and he'd been told nobody would be home.
Yeah, I've got a few meetups with him. So I've met him three times over the years. So I met him because he grew up not far from where I live here in Surrey. He was in Staines, obviously, and he had his house in Virginia Water as well. So I was always aware that he was kind of in the area. But I first met him when he did a gig in Guildford Civic Hall on the Sacrifice tour. And being at that point quite a young nerdy fan, I went back to the hotel and met him and the band there, which was really good fun. And that was because I'd got to know Richard Beasley very well, his drummer. So at the time I was working for a musical instrument company, and Richard was one of the endorsers for drum and percussion equipment. So I had met Richard through that, and I had actually gone to Gary's house in Essex to drop off the equipment for the Dream Corrosion tour. So I had met the band at that point, but not Gary. So it was nice to meet him. And then bizarrely, but again through Richard, I went to Richard's housewarming party, which was at the time near Richmond, and Aid Orange was there, and then Gary and Gemma came along. It was quite weird because it was a house full of sort of students and just kind of students at a party. And Aid was in the kitchen, Gary and Gemma were sitting on the stairs, and we just kind of chatted for maybe, I don't know, a couple of hours. It was really good fun, and then left. And the third time was probably the most exciting because, again, I was working with Richard on, it was the Premier Hits tour. And he asked me to deliver some sticks back to the house again, which again at the time was near Great Dunmow. And I drove over to the house to drop them off before the tour. And Richard had said, no one will be home, so just make sure that you leave them in the outbuildings. And when I got there, obviously I'd been there once before, I got there and I just thought, well, I'll just knock on the door. So I knocked on the front door. So this is 1996. And this voice behind the front door just goes, "Spooky, oi." And the door gets open and it's Gary. And he looks at me and he just goes, you were here a few weeks back. And I was like, yeah, just dropping this off for Richard. He's like, oh, come in.
Wow.
And I ended up walking into his kitchen, sitting in the kitchen, he made me a cup of tea. I got the chance to ask a few questions like, is Strange Charm ever going to come out on CD? And all that kind of stuff. And he was in the middle of, because Cars was coming out as the premiere version, he was on Top of the Pops the next night, so it must have been a Tuesday. They recorded it on a Wednesday, and he was in the middle of trying to splice together Cars instrumentally because he'd only just been told he had to sing live over the top of it on Top of the Pops. So we had, a really nice opportunity to have a chat. So I've not seen him again since then. That was 96. I got my name in the tour program, which was really nice for Richard. But then Richard and I have stayed friends. And last time I saw them live was the Roundhouse, which was November 24, I think. So I saw Richard and David Brooks there, but Gary had a really bad throat that night and he got back home. And I think the next night Dave Grohl turned up or something, and it's
typical.
like a bit of a celeb fest, I think.
Yeah.
But
I love that.
Great admiration for him. He's a great guy.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I've yet to hear a negative story of anyone who's like had a interaction with Gary, or he's always been so good at like talking to people, which is he'll say himself he's not, but he's so like warm and friendly with that sort of thing. So
and it was the fact he remembered me. I someone he's never met before and not important in his life, but he remembered that I had been there before. And I sat in when I went there the previous time. They were rehearsing for the White Room, and they did 2 tracks on the White Room. I think Gary and Gemma hadn't been together for that long, so they were kind of like teenagers in love and just having a great laugh. And the band was rehearsing in his front room. The studio was kind of almost like in the dining room, where the dining room would be in the house, but they were all rehearsing set up in the lounge. So it was just an amazing experience. And of course, I kind of left there phoning fellow friends and fans going, you are not going to believe where I've just been.
Amazing. So I have genuinely never heard of a bad story about meeting Gary Numan. For a man who will happily tell you that he's awkward with people, he does seem to be reliably lovely to every single one of them. So before we wrap up, I asked you for your verdicts of the Radio Heart era. And in true Numan fan tradition, you didn't hold back, and the responses split roughly 3 ways: the defenders, the executioners, and the people who just came for the jokes. So let's start with the memories, because a lot of you were there when it happened. John Garland remembers being pleasantly surprised that Radio Heart got so much Radio 1 airplay, very unusual for Gary in those days, and says it felt like a bigger hit than number 35 suggests. Gareth Bolt remembers exactly where he was, washing his car, Radio 1, when it first entered the charts, and Stephen Butterworth loved it and the video. He heard it on the radio without even knowing it had been released. Here's the defenders. Den J says you can't fault Numan for dabbling. Artists need to veer off, experiment and lose their inhibitions, and he bought the lot, Sharp and Numan included. And Adrian Brown agrees, great pop songs and no shame in that at all. Strawley Bolton says this song to me sums up the unique voice Numan has, written by 3 well-established songwriters who needed a voice that suited the sound and aesthetic of the track to make it resonate, and that voice was Numan's. A perfect choice to make this song stick like glue in your head forever. The prosecution, meanwhile, was robust. Gavin Hughes needed just 4 words, Numan without the Numan. Kev Gladdock called it Gary's tin machine. And David Lama reports that the Radio Heart picture disc looked great on his wall, which crucially, he jokes, also meant that he didn't have to listen to it. My favourite full verdict came from Darren Gwilt, who managed to span the entire spectrum in one comment. Radio Heart was okay. London Times prompted the question, why, just why? But all across the nation, to his surprise, is an absolute banger and one of his favourite driving tunes. And Like a Refugee might be his favourite Numan collaboration ever. Well, Darren, I'm keeping my London Times soft spot, but I respect it. A special mention to Stephen Walker, who declared I might be the only one who likes Like a Refugee. Well, Stephen, I have good news. You're in a surprisingly large club with Darren, Gwyn Butler, Colin Wright, and our guest Steve Thorpe among the membership. Simon Rippin echoed something we covered earlier. He thought it was a bit naughty that Gary's image was used on the album cover when he only sang 3 songs, but rated the B-sides, River and Mr. Sax especially. And the last word goes to 2 people. Carl Sherlock, a fan since 77, who never ever listens to the Radio Heart or Sharp era, nonetheless honours these songs by keeping Gary from quitting altogether. In his words, they're like that part-time call centre job you take on while you're retooling for a better career. And finally, Kim Atkinson, whose review of the entire era was simply not so keen, but still fancied him loads. So, where does Radio Heart sit in the Numan story? A mistake, as Gary would have it? I wouldn't say so, but it's also the moment his soundtrack ambitions first surfaced, the source of some of his most purely enjoyable pop vocals, and a snapshot of an artist at a crossroads, trying anything to keep moving, and now, for the first time, all of it is in one place, sounding the way it always should have. Radio Heart featuring Gary Numan all across the nation, a collection, is out on the 7th of August on Edsel Records, a deluxe gatefold 2 CD in 7-inch sized packaging, newly mastered by Phil Kinrad at Air Mastering with sleeve notes by our guest Steve Thorpe. It's up for pre-order now as I record this at Amazon, Rough Trade, Proper Music, Burning Shed and all the usual places, and you might, by now when you're listening to it, it might already be out. I have myself a copy and it's really gorgeous, so huge thanks to Steve for his time and for the stories. And if you've enjoyed this episode, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, leave a review and spread the word. You can email the show with your Numanoid stories as well, numanpodcast@gmail.com, or find me on social media at Numan Podcast, and everything else lives at numanpodcast.com. So until next time, thanks for listening and see you soon.
Electric Friends, a Gary Numan podcast. The songs and stories of a music icon.
And huge thanks once again to Classic Pop Magazine for sponsoring today's show. Don't forget, if you want to give Classic Pop a go, you can get your first issue completely free when you try a subscription today. Just head to classicpopmag.com/electricfriends to claim yours today.